welcome back or welcome if this is your first time here. You found a quiet place for dark stories, rain outside the window, and a voice to keep you company through the night. Get comfortable. Let the world fade away. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? And is this a late night for you or an early morning? And if you enjoy stories like this, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future nights here. Story 1. The cabin my grandfather forbade us from. I wasn't supposed to be here, in the place my grandfather spent his final, whispering years warning us about. My name is Lee, and this is the story of how I inherited a nightmare. It all started with a heavy iron key and a deed to a remote family cabin, left to me in his will with a single, underlined condition: do not go. But when your student loans are a monster under your own bed, and a free piece of property is the only key to escape it, you learn to ignore the ghosts of the past. Or so I thought. The drive up was beautiful, all fiery autumn leaves and crisp mountain air. The cabin itself, when I finally found it at the end of a washed-out logging road, was smaller and more weathered than the photos in Grandpa's old album. It had a certain charm, though. A stone chimney, a heavy oak door, and a view of a silent, glassy lake that took my breath away. The first unsettling detail was the lock. The key from the lawyer fit, but the heavy deadbolt looked brand new, installed from the inside. Who installs a lock from the inside and then leaves? I shrugged it off as one of Grandpa's eccentricities. The second was the smell. Not damp or musty, but a dry, sweet scent like old potpourri and burnt honey that clung to the back of my throat. The third was the silence. No birds, no squirrels, no wind in the pines around the lake. It was a vacuum of sound. I spent the first day cleaning, airing out the single room with its loft bed, trying to make it feel like mine. I found more of Grandpa's oddities: jars of rusted nails on every windowsill, intricate symbols carved into the door frames, and every mirror in the place was covered with a thick, dark cloth. I took them down, of course. I am a rational person. I figured the old man had just gone a bit around the bend after Grandma died. That first night, I built a fire, poured a glass of wine, and felt a deep, smug satisfaction. This was mine, my fresh start. But the silence got heavier after dark, so heavy I could hear the blood rushing in my own ears. I was just about to ask you all, actually, what's the weirdest, most inexplicable sound you've ever heard in the middle of the night? Because I have a new entry for that list. It started as a scrape, a slow, deliberate drag of something heavy across the wooden porch outside. My heart jumped into my throat. I froze, wine glass halfway to my lips. The scrape came again, followed by a soft, wet tap, 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 like a dog's paw, but slower, more deliberate. I crept to the window, peering through the gap in the curtains. The moon was bright, bleaching the clearing silver. There was nothing there, just the empty porch and the dark wall of trees. I let out a shaky breath. A branch, I told myself. just a branch in the wind, except there was no wind. I went to bed in the loft, telling myself it was the woods. Woods have sounds. But as I lay there in the dark, the sounds changed. They moved inside. Not the scampering of rodents, but a soft, shuffling gait on the floorboards below. Then, a sound that froze my marrow. A low, rhythmic clicking, like long fingernails on stone. It was coming from the fireplace. I pulled the covers over my head, a child's tactic against a very adult fear. The clicking stopped. For a long time, there was only the silence again. I must have fallen asleep from sheer exhaustion. The next morning, in the harsh, honest daylight, I felt foolish. See, I told myself, it was just the house settling, the sounds of an old building. I decided a hike around the lake would clear my head. The woods were just as silent by day, a cathedral of still pines. About halfway around the lake, I found it, a circle of flat, black stones in a small clearing. In the center was a deep, ash-filled pit. Around the stones were small, dried bundles that looked like feathers and bones tied with hair. And the smell from the cabin was stronger here, that cloying, sweet burnt smell. My rational mind started to fracture. This wasn't just Grandpa being odd. This was something else. I hurried back, the sense of isolation now feeling predatory, not peaceful. That's when I found the first message. Scratched into the soft wood of the kitchen table, fresh and deep, were the words. You took the cloths off. I hadn't noticed it before. It couldn't have been there before. I ran to the door, but the brand new deadbolt was still thrown, locked from the inside. The windows were latched. I was alone. Panic, cold and slick, rose in my chest. I did the only thing I could think of. I put all the cloths back over the mirrors, my hands trembling. For a few hours, there was peace. A false, watchful peace. I felt like I was being humored. As dusk fell, I decided to leave. I couldn't stay another night. I packed my bag, went to the door, and turned the deadbolt. It wouldn't move. I twisted harder, my sweat making my fingers slip. It was stuck fast. I tried a window. The latch lifted, but the window wouldn't budge, as if it had been painted shut 100 times over. I was trapped. In that moment, the last of the rational world fell away. This was the escalation. The house was keeping me. The temperature dropped suddenly. My breath fogged in the air. The sweet smell intensified, becoming sickly, suffocating. And then, from the covered mirror above the fireplace, a voice whispered. It wasn't Grandpa's voice. It was a horrible fusion of many whispers, dry leaves, and cracking ice. She sees us now, it hissed. All the covered mirrors in the room began to bulge inward, the cloths straining as if something was pressing against them from behind the glass. The clicking started again, from every corner of the room now, frantic and hungry. I backed into the center of the room, sobbing, clutching my backpack like a shield. What do you want? I screamed. The whispers coalesced. The reflection is the door. You opened the doors. We need a new one. The cloth over the largest mirror slid off. In the glass, I I didn't see my own terrified reflection. I saw the room behind me, but distorted. In that reflection, the room was crowded with tall, slender shapes, their outlines blurred like heat haze, their heads cocked at impossible angles. And in the reflection, one of them was standing right behind me, its long, clicking fingers reaching for my shoulder. I spun around. Nothing there. But in the mirror, they were all moving closer, their forms becoming clearer elongated limbs, faces that were smooth and empty except for dark pits where eyes should be. This was the climax. There was no monster to fight, no door to break down. The horror was in the interface, the thin layer of silvered glass that had become a permeable membrane. One of the figures in the mirror reached out, and its hand, cold and dry as ancient bark, breached the surface of the glass. It grabbed my wrist. I yanked back with a strength born of pure terror, stumbling away. The connection broke, but a searing cold burned where it had touched me. The things in the mirror began to press against the glass from their side, making it ripple like water. They were coming through. My grandfather hadn't been covering the mirrors out of superstition. He'd been barricading a door. In my blind panic, I remembered the jars of nails on the windowsills. An old, desperate folklore bubbled up in my mind. Iron. Scrambled, grabbing a jar, smashing it against the hearth. I snatched up a handful of rusted nails and, without thinking, threw them at the mirror. The effect was instantaneous. The whispering became a shriek of static. The bulging glass recoiled. The figures writhed back. It was hurting them. I grabbed more nails, lunging forward, and began to scratch at the surface of the mirror with the point of a nail, not trying to break it, but to mar it, to ruin the reflection. I carved a crude X across its surface. The connection severed with a sound like a sigh. The room warmed by a degree. The other covered mirrors went still. I spent the rest of the night with every light blazing, clutching a jar of nails, scratching a border of iron filings around every window and door. The things didn't return. At dawn, the deadbolt turned with a simple click. I ran to my car and didn't look back. I sold the cabin for a pittance to a land developer who didn't believe in ghosts. I told him about the foundation issues. I live in a small apartment now, in the noisy, bright heart of the city. I have no mirrors. My phone's front camera is covered with tape. I see my reflection in dark windows sometimes, and I have to look away. Because the story doesn't end with escape. The ending is in the lingering threat, the price of that night. You see, the burn on my wrist from where it grabbed me never healed. It's just a pale, cold patch of skin. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I feel it itching. And when I scratch it, the sensation isn't on my arm. It's behind my eyes. And in the quiet, if I listen too closely to the silence of my own apartment, I can almost hear the faint, familiar, rhythmic clicking coming from inside my own head. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill, that sense of something peering over your shoulder, then you understand. Please, if you enjoyed this journey into the dark, Give this video a thumbs up, it helps more than you know. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next tale. And tell me in the comments, if you inherited a property with a terrible warning, would you go? Be honest. Until next time, sleep well. Story 2. What the cabin inherited from me. I inherited my grandfather's cabin, and the first thing I did was break his only rule. My name is Marcus, and I am a photographer, or at least I am trying to be. When the lawyer's letter came, it felt like a sign. A secluded property in the thick pine forests of the Pacific Northwest, left solely to me. The only condition was a single, handwritten note tucked into the deed. Never stay past the last sundown of October. It was dated, superstitious nonsense, I thought. The perfect, moody setting for my new portfolio was worth a little rule breaking. I arrived on October 29th. The cabin, a sturdy but weary structure of dark-stained logs, was exactly as I remembered from childhood visits, both comforting and vaguely intimidating. The air inside smelled of old wood smoke and damp earth, a scent that seemed baked into the beams. I found my grandfather's old leather-bound journal on the mantelpiece, its pages filled with weather notes, sketches of local birds, and towards the end, increasingly frantic entries about the shifting and the quiet that gets inside. I dismissed it as the ramblings of an old man living alone too long. The first night was peaceful, just the creak of settling timber and the distant cry of an owl. But there were details, small things I wrote off. The way my reflection in the old, wavy bathroom window glass seemed a half-second out of sync. The faint, sweet-trot smell that came not from the forest, but from the crawl-space vent in the hallway. And the photographs. I'd take test shots of the interior, and in every one, in the corner of a room or just outside a window, there was a dark, blurry smudge. I blamed my lens, the low light. Have you ever had a moment where a place just feels wrong? Not scary, not yet, but deeply, fundamentally incorrect, like you're a puzzle piece forced into the wrong spot. That's how the silence felt on the second day. It wasn't an absence of sound. It was a thick, muffling blanket. The birds stopped. The wind in the pines died to nothing. My own footsteps on the porch boards sounded dull and swallowed. I tried to laugh it off, to play music, but the notes fell flat, absorbed by the stillness. That night, the false safety came. I woke up at 3 a.m., my heart pounding from a forgotten dream, only to find the profound silence had broken. I could hear the gentle rustle of leaves, the normal night sounds. Relief, warm and heady, flooded me. See, I told myself, just an old house and an overactive imagination. I made a cup of tea, feeling foolish. That's when I saw the first photograph on my digital camera, one I was sure I hadn't taken. It was a shot of me, asleep in bed, from the perspective of the bedroom doorway. The date stamp was tomorrow's date, October 31st. The escalation was a quiet, digital horror. My phone, fully charged, died. My laptop wouldn't boot, but the camera worked fine. Too fine. It began taking pictures on its own, the shutter clicking softly at random intervals. The images were mundane at first. The fireplace, the kitchen sink, the front door. Then they became specific. Close-ups of the lock on my suitcase. A shot of the car keys on the hook. A picture of the axe by the woodpile. Finally, they became impossible. A photograph of the interior of the locked crawlspace. A space no larger than a coffin, filled with what looked like thick, black roots. But in the center of the tangle was a single human eye, wide open and staring directly at the lens. The timestamp on that one was always 1 hour ahead of the current time. I decided to leave. The last sundown of October was bleeding across the sky as I threw my things into the car. The engine turned over once, coughed, and died. Completely dead, as if the battery had been removed. Panic, cold and sharp, finally took hold. I ran back inside to get my satellite phone from my bag. The cabin door slammed shut behind me with a finality that echoed. It wouldn't open. The handle wouldn't even turn. From the old fireplace, a new sound emerged, not crackling flame, but a slow, wet, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled over stone. The smell of sweet rot intensified, choking the air. The climax wasn't a chase. It was a presence. The lights flickered and died, plunging the main room into deep twilight. The dragging sound stopped at the mouth of the hearth. I fumbled for my camera, my stupid, cursed camera, and pointed it toward the fireplace, my finger pressing the shutter on reflex. The flash exploded in the dark. In the blinding afterimage, I saw it. It wasn't a monster in any traditional sense. It was a figure of woven shadow, and the substance of the cabin itself splintered wood, crumbling mortar, rusted nail headsaw pulled into a crude, humanoid shape that was both utterly alien and horrifyingly familiar. In its chest, where heart might be, was a cavity, and within that cavity, glowing with a sickly phosphorescence, were dozens of tiny, framed photographs. I recognized them. My grandfather's birthday, my mother as a child on the porch, me last summer at a cafe in the city. It was a collection, a family album. It took a step forward, and the floorboards didn't creak beneath it. They sighed, as if exhausted. It reached for me, not with a hand, but with a tendril of darkness that smelled of damp soil and forgotten film. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I just stared into that cavity of stolen moments, understanding my grandfather's journal at last. The shifting was this. The cabin didn't just stand on the land, it was slowly digesting it. And it had a taste for memories, for lineage, for the essence of those who belonged to it. It wasn't inheriting the cabin. The cabin was inheriting me. I woke up on the floor at dawn on October 31st. The car started instantly. The sun was bright. The birds sang. It felt like the world had reset. I drove away, shaking, never looking back. I settled in a city 1,000 miles away. I got a normal job. I never took another photograph. For a year, I almost convinced myself it was a psychotic break brought on by grief and isolation. Until this morning, a padded envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a single, glossy 8x10 print. It's a picture of my new apartment living room, taken last night. I am on the sofa, asleep. The timestamp on the bottom corner is for tonight's date. And in the corner of the room, just bleeding out of the shadows near the bookshelf, is a familiar dark smudge, now sharper, more defined. It's the shape of an open door. It seems the inheritance wasn't tied to the property after all. It seems the quiet did get inside. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill, that sense of something watching from a dark corner, then you understand. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more tales of the unexplained. Your engagement helps keep these stories alive. And tell me in the comment shave, you ever felt a presence in a place that just didn't want you there? What's the strangest family rule you've ever heard? I read every single one. Until next time, sleep well. Story 3. The night my GPS chose a different route. I used to think the worst thing you could find on a dark road was another person. But now, I know the truth. The worst thing is finding a place that shouldn't exist, a place that remembers you. The drive was supposed to be a straight shot, a 10-hour overnight haul from my sister's wedding in Denver back to my life in Phoenix. My name is Marcus. I was tired, strung out on cheap coffee and familial obligation, but I was making good time. The desert highway was a black ribbon under a sky so thick with stars it felt oppressive. My phone was mounted on the dash, the soothing blue line of the GPS, my only companion. The first strange detail was the silence. No other headlights, not for over an hour. The second was the smell that seeped in through the vents, not the clean, dry scent of desert sage, but something damp and mineral, like wet limestone. The third was the road itself. The smooth asphalt had given way, without any sign, to an older, coarser surface that made my tires hum a different, lower note. I was rubbing my eyes, blaming fatigue, when my phone screen flickered. The map stuttered, the blue line dissolving into pixels. Rerouting, the smooth, automated female voice announced. A new path materialized, a thin gray branch veering off the main highway, cutting directly into a dense, black mass of foothills the interstate had wisely avoided. No, no, go back, I muttered, tapping the screen. It was unresponsive. Recalculating, the voice said, cheerful and final. The turn was coming up fast and narrow, unmarked asphalt tongue leading into absolute darkness. I had a choice. Stop on the shoulder of this deserted highway and wait for dawn, or trust the technology. My tank was half full, my courage less so, but stopping felt like admitting defeat to the emptiness. I took the turn. The road immediately began to climb, winding tightly. the headlights carving out a tunnel through pines that crowded the edges, as if trying to reclaim the pavement. The damp, cave-like smell grew stronger. My GPS showed the new route shaving 20 minutes off my trip. A lie, of course. But what unsettled me more was the name that now appeared at the top of the screen for my destination. Home. I lived in an apartment in Phoenix. This was not the way home. Hey, while I've got you here, let me ask you something. Have you ever had a piece of technology, something you rely on completely, just betray you? A phone that calls someone on its own, a navigation system that seems to have a mind of it. It's a uniquely modern kind of dread, isn't it? Let me know in the comments. The pines gave way to jagged rock walls. I was in a canyon, the road now barely wide enough for my sedan. And then I saw the lights. Not the welcoming glow of a gas station, but a dim, orangey haze from behind a stand of tall, skeletal cottonwood trees. The road ended in a circular gravel lot, and there it was, a 2-story motel, the kind built in the 50s with a neon sign that had seen better decades. The sign crackled, buzzing like a trapped insect. It read, "The Wayfarer's Rest." The R in rest was dark. It read the WAYFA E's EST. Underneath, a smaller, rusted sign proclaimed, "Vacancy." My phone chimed. "You have arrived." The screen went black and refused to turn back on. The car's digital clock flashed 12:00 a.m., then died. Panic, cold and sharp, tightened my chest. This was wrong. This place was a pocket of stale air in the middle of nowhere. I turned the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, and died. Not a click, not a grind. It just stopped, as if the will to run had been siphoned out of it. That's when I saw him. Figure stepped out from the shadow of the motel office, illuminated by the sickly neon. An old man, tall and gaunt, wearing a faded burgundy vest. He didn't walk toward me, he simply stood, waiting, his hands clasped in front of him. I had no service. The car was dead. The canyon walls rose like the sides of a grave. With a leaden feeling, I got out. The air was cold and still, that damp stone smell now overwhelming. "Help you," the old man said. His voice was like dry paper rubbing together. My car died. I need a tow truck or a phone that works. He smiled, a thin stretching of lips. Phones don't work in the gorge. The rock blocks things. You can have a room for the night. Fix it in the morning. Every instinct screamed to run. But run where? Into the dark, roadless canyon. How much? For a stranded traveler, no charge. Room 207. Top of the stairs. Keys in the door. He turned and went back inside the office, the door sighing shut behind him. The staircase was iron, creaking with every step. Room 207's door was faded green. The key was an old brass skeleton key, cold to the touch. The room inside was a time capsule, floral wallpaper peeling at the seams, a sagging bed, a heavy CRT television, and a smell of dust and old perfume. I locked the door and shoved the room's flimsy chair under the knob. It felt pathetic. sat on the edge of the bed, head in my hands. This was just a weird, bad luck night. I'd get help in the morning. False safety washed over me, warm and seductive. I was inside, locked in. Nothing could get to me. I must have dozed off because the sound woke me violently. It was a scratching, not at the door, inside the wall. A slow, deliberate drag, like something with long fingernails, was tracing the patterns of the wallpaper from the other side. I froze, my blood turning to ice. It moved from behind the bed, across the wall adjacent to the bathroom, and stopped right next to the room's closet. Then came the whisper. It wasn't a voice. It was the sound of static, shaped into words, emanating from the old television's grill. Maracus ure late. I shot to my feet. The scratching in the wall started again, faster, frantic. Then a loud thump from the closet door, as if something heavy had fallen against it. I stumbled backward, grabbing the brass key. The chair under the doorknob began to rattle, not from someone trying to get in, but from a deep, rhythmic pounding coming up through the floorboards, shaking the entire room. The neon sign outside my window flashed, and in its strobing light, I saw shadows move across the wall-tall, thin, reaching shapes that did not match the furniture. I couldn't stay. I yanked the chair away, fumbled the key into the lock, and burst out into the hallway. The long corridor was dark, lit only by a single, flickering bulb at the far end. The carpet was a swampy green, and the doors, all the doors were slightly ajar. As I ran for the stairs, I glimpsed movement in every open crack a pale eye, a shifting darkness, a hand curled around a doorframe. The static whisper followed me, coalescing into a chorus from every room. Stay rest ure home, I took the stairs 2 at a time, my heart hammering against my ribs. The office was dark. The old man was gone. My car sat in the empty lot, but as I sprinted toward it, the headlights suddenly blazed on by themselves, illuminating the canyon wall ahead. And there, painted in the light, was a massive, faded mural I hadn't seen before. It depicted this very motel, and in front of it, a tiny stick figure car, and a tiny stick figure man, drawn in childish lines, running. The mural was old, the paint cracked and peeling. It looked decades old. The car's engine roared to life. The driver's door swung open, an invitation. This was my way out. This was salvation. I dove in, slammed it into drive, and spun gravel as I sped back down the narrow canyon road. I didn't look back. I drove until the sky began to lighten to gray, until the pines thinned and the smooth, wide lane of the interstate appeared like a miracle. I sobbed with relief. My phone, plugged into the car charger, beeped back to life. Service returned. I called AAA, gave them my location on the interstate, told them my car had mysteriously died, and then restarted. I never mentioned the motel. It felt like a fever dream, a hallucination born of exhaustion. They towed me to a garage in the next town. The mechanic, A friendly guy with grease on his hands found the problem almost immediately. "Mouse," he said, holding up a shredded piece of wiring. "Nested in your engine compartment, chewed right through your ignition line. Would have stalled you out for sure. Funny thing, though." "What?" I asked, my mouth dry. He showed me the wire. Wrapped tightly around it, almost woven into the plastic coating, was a long, coarse strand of hair. Gray hair. And tangled within it, a tiny, brittle flake of something that looked like ancient, faded floral wallpaper. "Weird place for a nest," he said. "I got a hotel room in that town, a clean, bright chain hotel, and slept for 14 hours. When I woke, it was evening. I felt sane again. The terror of the night was receding, becoming just a bad story. I ordered food, turned on the TV for normal noise. As I scrolled through my phone, a notification popped up. It was from a mapping app I rarely used. "Review your recent trip," it asked. Curiosity, morbid and heavy, made me tap it. A map loaded. It showed my entire drive from Denver. The solid line of the interstate. And then a clear, recorded detour. The thin line veered off into the empty space of the map, where no roads were charted. It ended at a point labeled in my own phone's history. Destination reached. Home. The timestamp for arrival was 11:57 p.m. The timestamp for departure was 4:02 a.m. But the chilling part was the icon. It wasn't a flag or a star. The app had automatically chosen an icon for the destination. It had chosen a small graphic of a bed, and below that, the app had generated a trip note based on location data and its own algorithms. It read, "Welcome back. We hope you enjoyed your stay at the Wayfarer's Rest. I sit here now in my actual apartment in Phoenix, writing this. The mechanic fixed the wire. My car runs fine. My phone works. But sometimes, late at night, if the power flickers or the Wi-Fi drops, ill smell it that faint, damp scent of wet limestone. And on my quietest nights, I can almost hear the soft, inviting crackle of neon, calling me back to the place that has already decided I belong. Because the truly horrifying thing isn't getting lost. It's having something find you and quietly, permanently, update your address. Thank you for listening to my story. If you felt that chill, that sense of something being deeply wrong, then you understand. Please, if you enjoyed this journey into the dark, show your support, give this video a like. It helps more than you know. And subscribe to the channel for more tales from the shadows, where the familiar becomes frightening, and the road never takes you where you think it will. Tell me in the comments, have you ever seen a place on a map that just shouldn't be there? Story 4. The last thing my grandmother left me. I didn't inherit my grandmother's house because she loved me. I inherited it because she knew I was the only one who wouldn't run away. My name is Annika. 2 months ago, I got the call that Nanny had passed peacefully in her sleep in the old family home, a crumbling Victorian on a forgotten stretch of coastal Maine. The lawyer's letter was clear. The house and all its contents were mine, on the condition I live in it for a minimum of 90 days to settle the estate's spirit. I thought it was just legal jargon, a quirky clause from an old woman who loved her superstitions. I was a freelance graphic designer. I could work from anywhere. A free house, even a creaky, sea salt-stained one, was a blessing. So I packed my laptop and my cat, Binks, and drove north. The first week was about charm. The house groaned like a living thing with every tide change, the wind whistling through gaps in the widow's walk. The air always smelled of three things: damp old paper, the sharp, briny scent of the ocean, and beneath it all, the faint, sweet perfume of Nanny's favorite tuberose incense. Shed burned it daily. I found boxes of the slender sticks in a kitchen cupboard. The unsettling details were small, easy to dismiss. All the mirrors in the house were draped with faded black cloths. The single photograph of Nanny, from when she was a young woman in Mumbai, showed her looking sternly at the camera, her hand conspicuously covering her own reflection in a nearby vase. And then there was the music box. It sat alone on the mantelpiece in the formal parlor, a beautiful, lacquered thing depicting a peacock with sapphire eyes. A note in Nanny's spidery handwriting was taped beneath it. For Annika, do not open until the moon is full. I am not superstitious. I am, however, profoundly curious. The full moon was 2 nights after I arrived. With a glass of wine for courage, I lifted the lid. Instead of a tinkling melody, a slow, raspy whisper emanated from within, a voice that was both familiar and alien. It spoke a single sentence in Gujarati, a language I barely understood. Vesha pot chhe. The box snapped shut on its own, the latch cold against my probing finger. I spent the next hour on translation apps. The closest I got was, "The guest is inside." I laughed it off. A clever recording, one of Nanny's strange jokes. Binks, however, spent the rest of the night staring fixedly at the closed door of the linen closet, his fur puffed up, a low growl rumbling in his throat. What's the strangest thing you've ever inherited? Was it something wonderful, or something that came with its own set of rules? Let me know in the comments, because this was just the beginning. The whispers didn't stop with the box. They began to seep into the house itself. At first, it was just on the edge of hearing, like a radio playing in another room. I'd be working, headphones on, and jerk them off, convinced I'd heard my name. Silence. Then, the smells intensified. The tuberose incense would bloom in the air of a room I hadn't entered for hours, thick and cloying, with an underlying note of something metallic, like old blood. The draped mirrors I caught myself wanting to pull the cloths aside, a compulsive itch between my shoulder blades. One afternoon I did. In the hall mirror, just for a fraction of a second, my reflection didn't move with me. It stood still, staring back, its eyes dark hollows, before the image snapped back to normal. I threw the cloth back over it so fast I nearly tore it. The worst was the sleep. I'd wake at exactly 3:07 a.m. every night, parched, my heart hammering. The house would be silent, but too silent, as if it were holding its breath. Binks would be a tense ball at the foot of my bed, eyes wide. One night, I heard it clearly, a soft, shuffling gait in the hallway outside my door. Not the cat, something heavier, with a slow, deliberate drag. I held my breath, my fingers clenched around my blanket. The shuffling stopped right outside my door. Then, the sweet, rotten scent of tuberose and metal wafted under the door. I must have passed out from fear, because I woke to dawn light and the sound of gulls. I called a handyman, blaming pipes and settling noises. He was a local, older, with wary eyes. He fixed a leak under the sink, but when I casually asked about the history of the house, he grew quiet. "Your grandmother was a private woman," he said, not meeting my gaze. "Knew things folks round here didn't. Kept to her ways. Some said she was keeping something in. Others said she was keeping something out." He left without having tea, his work only half finished. After that, I decided to leave. The 90-day clause be damned, I could hire a lawyer to fight it. This was my sanity. I spent a day packing frantically, the sense of relief so palpable it felt like a physical weight lifting. As dusk fell, I loaded the last box into my car. Binks was in his carrier, meowing plaintively. I stood on the front porch, key in hand, ready to lock up for what I thought was the last time. The house looked almost benevolent in the twilight, just an old, lonely house. I'd imagined it all. Stress, grief, isolation. I took a deep breath of the clean, cold ocean air. It was over. That's when the front door slammed shut behind me with a force that shook the porch. My keys, my phone, my wallet, everything was inside. And through the bay window, I saw the light in the parlor flick on. The music box was on the floor in the center of the room, its lid gaping open. The whispering was back, but now it was a chorus, layered and insistent, pouring from every corner of the house. The door was locked. Every window I tried was sealed shut, not just locked, but fused, as if the wood had grown together. I was trapped outside my own inheritance. Panic is a cold fire. I grabbed a rock from the garden, smashed a small pane in the kitchen window, reached in to unlock it. The cut on my arm was shallow, but as my blood smeared the windowsill, the whispering stopped. A profound, deafening silence fell. I climbed into the dark kitchen. The smell of tuberose was overwhelming. A single path of faint, ghostly light emanated from the parlor. I knew, with a certainty that froze my marrow, that I was being summoned. I walked. The floorboards, which usually creaked with every step, were silent under my feet. The parlor archway loomed. Inside, the music box was still open, but the room was different. The shadows in the corners were too deep, solid, and in Nanny's favorite armchair, a shape sat. It wasn't a person. It was a concentration of darkness, a humanoid void that drank the light. The sweet metallic stench poured from it. The peacock on the music box seemed to watch, its sapphire eyes glowing with a faint, internal light. The voice that spoke was the rasp from the box, but now it was clear inside my skull. "The guest is inside," it said. "Your blood on the threshold is the invitation." The 90 days were not for the estate. They were for you, to make you familiar, to make you a suitable home. I understood then. The claws, the mirrors hiding reflections, the whispers Nanny hadn't been a custodian of the house. She'd been a jailer. She'd bound this thing, this guest, with her rituals, her incense, her rules. And in her death, the binding was failing. She left the house to me, her skeptical, modern granddaughter, because she knew I'd break the rules. I'd open the box. I'd cut myself on the window. I'd provide the final, necessary component for the guest to step out of the shadows and into a new vessel. Not the house, me. It moved. It didn't stand up, it unfolded from the chair, stretching into a taller, thinner darkness. It flowed toward me. I couldn't scream. I couldn't run. The scent of tuberose filled my mouth, my lungs. The cold of the sea in winter seeped into my bones. The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed my vision was the music box, its lid slowly, finally clicking shut. I woke up on the parlor floor at dawn. The cut on my arm was gone. The house was quiet. Sunlight streamed in, normal and cheerful. Binks was rubbing against my leg, purring. It felt like a dream, a horrific, vivid nightmare. I stumbled to the kitchen, made coffee with trembling hands. I looked out at the ocean, trying to ground myself. My reflection in the window glass looked back at me. I smiled in relief. My reflection did not. It stared with cold, ancient eyes, and slowly, deliberately, it brought its finger to its lips in a gesture of silence. Then it turned and walked away into the darkened image of the kitchen behind it, leaving my own terrified face staring back from the empty glass. I am still here in the house. I am following the rules now. I keep the mirrors covered. I burn the incense. I speak to no one, because the guest is no longer inside the house. The guest is inside me. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill down your spine, you know the kind of horror that stays with you. If you want to help keep this channel going and hear more tales from the edge of the unknown, please hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss what lurks in the next video. And tell me in the comments what would you have done if you were in my place. Story 5. Why I never answer doors after dark. I used to think my fear of doors was childish, until I learned that something on the other side was learning to knock. My name is Ava, and for 6 months, I've been living in a state of quiet, desperate terror, all because I inherited my grandmother's apartment. It wasn't a windfall. The building was old, a pre-war brick monolith on a street that seemed perpetually stuck in the gray hour before dusk. A Apartment 4B smelled of lemon polish, dust, and something else, something faintly sweet and earthy I could never place. But it was mine, rent-free, a sanctuary after a brutal divorce. The first oddity was the mail. I'd find letters for previous tenants, some dated decades back, slipped under my door. The super, a man named Mr. Gable who smelled of mothballs and suspicion, said it was just the old building settling, the mailman confused. He told me walls shift here. Things get lost and found. I should have asked what things he meant. The second detail was the silence. Not an empty silence, but a thick, absorbent one. Street noise died at the threshold. My own footsteps were muffled. It felt like the apartment was listening, holding its breath. The final, subtle thing was the peephole. It was reversed. When I looked through it, the hall was a fisheye panorama. But it always felt like the distortion was on my side, like the world outside was the clear one, and I was in the bubble. I told myself I was being jumpy, attributing my anxiety to the divorce, to the new solitude. So, viewers, let me ask you something while we're in this calm before the storm. What's your weirdest, most inexplicable habit your family has? A weird rule, a strange tradition. For me, it was my grandmother's one, unwavering rule drilled into my mother, and then half-heartedly into me. Never, ever answer the door after dark unless you are absolutely certain who is there. Not if they knock, not if they ring, not if they call your name. We always laughed it off as an old woman's paranoia. I wasn't laughing anymore. The events began logically, almost reasonably. It started with the knocking. A soft, polite tap 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 at 9:03 p.m. 3 nights after I moved. I froze, my book heavy in my lap. I crept to the door, leaned my eye against the cold brass of the reversed peephole. The hallway was empty, the dim sconce casting long, wavering shadows from the stairwell. I shrugged it off. Kids, I thought. Wrong apartment. The next night, 9:03 p.m. Tap, tap, tap. This time I was faster, pressing my eye to the glass. Again, nothing. A cold thread of unease wove through my gut. The third night, I stood by the door at 9:02, heart thudding. Right on time, tap, 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 4 knocks. I didn't look. I just backed away, my breath shallow. The pattern escalated. The knocks grew firmer, more impatient. They began to migrate. From the front door to my bedroom door inside the apartment late at night. I'd bolt awake to the sound of knuckles on wood from the hallway, my bedroom door shaking in its frame. I'd scream, "Who is it?" Only to be met with a silence, so profound it felt like a physical slap. One night I smelled it. That sweet, earthy scent from my first day, now cloying and thick, seeping under the door. It was the smell of damp soil and rotten flowers. I called Mr. Gable the next morning. His voice, usually gruff, went flat. "Don't answer it, Miss Ava. Your grandmother knew. Just don't answer." Then came the whispers. They weren't in the hall, they were in the walls. A faint, papery rustle of words I couldn't quite grasp. always at the edge of sleep. I started sleeping with the lights on, with a chair wedged under the bedroom doorknob. I was a ghost in my own home, tiptoeing through the days, dreading the sunset. I researched the building. Records were spotty, but I found a microfiche article about a previous tenant in Forbade, a reclusive man named Alistair Vane, who vanished in the 1950s. The police report noted the apartment was found locked from the inside, a cold cup of tea on the table, and the faint, pervasive smell of loam and decay. No body was ever found. I reached a breaking point. I decided to get a camera, a little wireless one, to mount in the hall outside my door. If it was a prank, it'd have evidence. The camera arrived on a Tuesday. That night, the knocking didn't come at 9:03. The silence was worse. I watched the live feed on my tablet, the empty, grainy hallway. Midnight passed. At 3:07 a.m., the feed glitched, a burst of static. When it cleared, a figure stood directly in front of my door. It was tall, impossibly thin, wearing a dark, outdated suit. Its back was to the camera. It didn't move. It just stood there for an hour. I watched, paralyzed, as it simply existed in that space. Then, with a jerky, unnatural motion, it tilted its head as if listening. It raised one long-fingered hand and knocked softly on my door. Tap, tap, tap. On my screen, and simultaneously, through the very wood of the door in front of me. The sound was in stereo. I choked back a sob. Figure on the feed then turned slowly to face the camera. Its face was a smooth, pale oval devoid of features. No eyes, no nose, just a slight, lipless slit for a mouth. It leaned in until the featureless face filled the entire screen. The feed died. That was it. I was done. I called a locksmith the next day and had a heavy-duty deadbolt installed. I bought thick blackout curtains. I lived like a mole, jumping at every creak. For a whole week, there was nothing. No knocks, no whispers, no smells. The silence returned to just silence. I began to breathe. Maybe the new lock did it. Maybe showing I wasn't an easy target made it move on. False safety is a seductive, cruel drug. I started sleeping through the night. I made tea in my kitchen without scanning the shadows. I almost felt normal. The climax happened on a rainy Thursday. I was cozied on the sofa, a blanket over my legs, the sound of the rain masking the oppressive quiet. I was finally relaxed. Then a new sound, not a knock, a scratch. A long, slow, deliberate drag of something sharp against the other side of the front door, from the top of the frame all the way down to the floor. I sat bolt upright, the blanket pooling at my feet. Another scratch, this one on the inside of my bedroom door, down the hall. SCRRRR rape. The smell flooded back, overwhelming, the scent of an opened grave after a rainstorm. All the lights in the apartment flickered and died, plunging me into a blackness so complete I felt weightless. The scratching became frenzied, now on every door of the closet, the bathroom, the front door, a cacophony of nails on wood. And underneath it, a wet, guttural whisper, sliding through the keyhole of the bedroom door. Ava let me in. Ure in my place. I did the only thing I could think of. I didn't run for the door. I didn't scream. I remembered my grandmother's rule, not as paranoia, but as a survival guide. I stood on shaking legs, faced the front door, and said, my voice trembling but clear, I am certain I do not know you. You are not welcome here. The scratching stopped. The whisper ceased. The sweet, rotten smell intensified, then began to fade, as if retreating down a long tunnel. The lights flickered back on. The apartment was empty, wrecked, but empty. I moved out the next day. I left everything behind. I told the police nothing they would believe. Mr. Gable just nodded when I gave him the keys, his eyes knowing and fearful. I live in a bright, new, paper-thin walled condo now. I hear my neighbors, the traffic, life. It's loud, and I am grateful for every sound. But I still have one unwavering rule, a rule I understand in my bones. I never answer the door after dark. Not if they knock, not if they ring. Because sometimes, when the hallway in my new building is too quiet, and the shadows from the stairwell seem just a little too long, I can still hear a faint, polite tap, tap, tap from my old bedroom closet. And I know, with a chill that never truly leaves, that certain invitations, once offered, are never fully rescinded. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill down your spine, you're not alone. The unknown has a way of tapping on the windows of our reality when we least expect it. If you enjoyed this tale, please give this video a thumbs up. It helps more people find our little corner of horror. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. What's your family's strangest rule? And do you think there was a terrifying reason behind it? Stay curious, but maybe keep a light on. Thank you for spending part of your night with us. If you enjoyed the story, we'd appreciate a comment, a like, and a subscription to the channel. And please share this video with your friends who enjoy calm horror and rain sounds. Rest well and good night.